So I will start the recording. This is Sue Petrisin from the Michigan District. I want to welcome you all tonight to Voices of Service. We have a great program planned for this evening to talk about the amendments and the House of Delegates business session at the Kiwanis International Convention in Denver, Colorado on July 6th, which, if I remember correctly, is 44 days away. I hate to say that to people because it'll put people in panic, like, oh my gosh, we only got 44 days until, well, and that's when the House of Delegates is, so it's probably less than that, in preparation for travel and getting everybody to Denver and stuff like that. So we are recording tonight, and I will make sure that this is put up on the YouTube page as soon as it downloads from the cloud this evening. And as a reminder, we do not have a session next week. We are not meeting next Thursday night. I will be out of town, and Thursday night there's a big meeting that I have to be at in Boston, so I'll be there. On June 6th, Will Tiemann, who is the president of Spartan Sports Vision, will talk about broadcasting the Michigan State University men's basketball games. I know some of you are like, what? Some of you are like, yes, okay, good, something different. So we're going to do that. And then we have next couple of weeks of sessions together. I'll get all that together and get that out on the webpage, on the Facebook page, and get that out there. But tonight we have with us, one of the things that we've been talking about the last several weeks is the convention coming up and the amendments that are before the House and proposed amendments and resolutions that will be considered on July 6th. And I have invited to be with us this evening Diana O'Brien, who is our governance specialist, and she's actually retired, but she's hanging around with us and going to work with us for a while. Erica Gould. Erica, if you are able to put your picture on, that would be great, just so people can see you. Erica is in training. If you can't, that's okay, Erica. Erica will be working with Diana to transition that position from Kiwanis International. And of course, our executive director, Paul Palazzolo, is with us. So he is going to join us this evening to help us understand how the House of Delegates works and answer questions. The intent is not to get into any discussion on the amendments themselves, and to get into discussion about dues amounts or, that type of stuff, but really to educate our members and those of you that are here on the workings of a House of Delegates. For those of you that know Robert's Rules of Order, that's how we operate, but we also have our own bylaws. And Diana is I will say that she's an expert in that. She's very well versed in the Kiwanis International bylaws and policies and has spent a lot of time with us. Diana, how many years do you have with us?
40, almost, just like 4 months shy of 42 years.
Right. So,
but not all in governance.
Not all in governance, but many years in governance that she has worked in. Diana is a great person to reach out to if you ever need any assistance. Well, if you can convince her to talk now that she's retired. But I just want to let everybody know that we'd like you to keep your stay on mute tonight. And if you have any questions or comments, if you would put those in the chat. If we have questions that we don't get to this evening, which I don't think that will be an issue, we probably will get them. We'll get those questions answered later, or if Diana or Paul or Erica need to do some further checking and get back with us, we will do that as well. So we just want to make sure people realize that we will get to everything, and hopefully we'll get all the questions answered. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Diana.
Oh, okay. Hey, I will say briefly, all the confidence that Sue and others have in me as the recently retired governance specialist. Erica is doing a bang-up job. She comes with a very solid foundation in the subject matter and a passion for Kiwanis, and by next year you're going to have that same confidence in her for sure once you've worked with her a couple times. So that's great. Okay, well, I guess let's see. Okay, so we're going to go through some basics for the House of Delegates, kind of set the scene for those of you that are on this program. The amendments booklet is linked. It has been out there for quite a while. It's on the Denver webpage, which is kiwanis.org/convention. Nice and easy to get to. There's a picture of it. There's a link on that page. It says elections, amendments, and resolutions. You just click on that link and you'll get to the booklet. The booklet includes not only the amendments themselves and a lovely cover letter from Paul, but parliamentary procedure at a glance and standing rules for the House of Delegates. So You'll want to review those in advance and encourage others who are planning to be there or just curious about the process, encourage them to do that as well. And they are obviously they're printed in the booklet. So, and you'll have a booklet in hand. If you want a printed copy, there'll be printed copies on site. So you can refer to them during the session. And if you prefer to use electronic copy, if you've got an iPad or cell phone or something, and you want to have the electronic copy up, you can still refer to them that way. As it says, be an informed delegate and share the knowledge. Try to help others out. We weren't going to go through all of parliamentary procedure at a glance. That does tell you things like how to place a motion, how to make what's called a secondary motion, like if you want to make an amendment to the amendment. It talks about how to ask a question. So we can go through those if there's time and you want to. We weren't really planning to go through those this session. I did want to go through some key information from the standing rules, such as the time limits. We have several time limits, and these haven't changed in a number of years with one exception. So there's a 2-minute limit for each speaker. Anybody who gets up to the microphone, whether you are moving that amendment, moving that motion, so then you get to speak to it first and say why this is a wonderful thing for Kiwanis to do and why all the delegates should adopt it. They get a 2-minute time limit, or whether you're coming up to the microphone after that to speak for or against it, you get a 2-minute time limit as well. We'll go more into the people speaking at the microphone on the next slide. There's a 30-minute overall time limit for amendments 1 and 2. Those were the 2 money amendments proposed by the board. Amendment 1 is the KI board's proposal on dues, and Amendment 2 is the KI board's proposal on tiers. Then there's a 15-minute overall time limit for each of the other amendments. That's we have 10 this year. So 15 minutes is the norm, but the board said, it would be a good idea to give people extra time to speak on the things related to money. So in advance, they said we're going to have a 30-minute time limit for those 2 amendments. I'm going to jump ahead a minute here. At the very bottom, it says debate may be extended on any matter by a majority vote of the House. So anybody can go up the microphone. If we reach any of these time limits, whether it's a 15-minute or the 30-minute, depending on which amendment it is, if we reach that time limit, any delegate can go up to microphone and say, hey, I think we should extend the time. And then the president will say, well, let's ask the House, have the House vote up or down on extending the time. They'll have to suggest how long we extend the time for. So if you're thinking to do that or know someone thinking to do that, they'll say, let's extend the time by 10 minutes or 3 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever they're going to say. And if they don't say it, the president will prompt them. There is, you all have heard the term, probably several of you, an amendment to the amendment. Those are revisions suggested during debate from the floor to one of the individual amendments. There's usually a 5-minute time limit on those, which really doesn't give us much time for very many speakers. If each speaker has a 2-minute limit, that only gives you time for like 2.5 speakers. That's been enough in the past, but again, on amendments 1 and 2, the board said, let's extend the timing on that a bit too. So it's 10 minutes for those, just for the amendments to the amendments. If somebody says, hey, I want to make one little tweak to this amendment, here's what it is. You can take 10 minutes to talk about it if it's those, or 5 minutes if it's one of the others. Debate on an amendment to the amendment does not count toward the overall time limit for that amendment. If that's not clear, we can talk about that in the Q&A. And this is my last slide, some of the key standing rules. Microphone, it just as always in the past, microphones are designated as pro and con, for and against. So you'll go to the correct microphone, depending on whether you want to speak for it or against it. Wait to be recognized from the podium. We'll go with the order that people line up. State your name and your club first, and then make your motion or make your comments. Hey, I think this is a horrible thing, and here's why. Or hey, this is wonderful. Let's do this, and here's why. Rule 6, each delegate has a 2-minute time limit. We covered that a while ago. Rule 7, a delegate cannot speak a second time unless no one else wants to speak. I'm paraphrasing several of these rules to kind of shorten them and put them in less legalese, but that's what the essence of what each one is. Rule 11, only priority motions, which is a point of order or a point of information, can interrupt the line of speakers of the microphones. Pardon me. So you simply have to wait your turn, no matter how important you think your remarks are, unless you have a priority motion. I will add too, I did not put in here, but it mentions either in the parliamentary procedure, I think it's there, or the standing rules, that if you want to suggest the House do something, but you're not sure how to propose it, you go to, when it's your turn at the microphone, you say, Madam President, this is what I think we should do, but I don't know how to do that. How do we do that? And she and the parliamentarian can guide you on that. Last rule, and this is very important, any motion from the floor, that is what we're calling an amendment to the amendment. Any revisions that a delegate wants to suggest during debate. So any motion from the floor must be written in English, signed by the maker and the seconder, and presented to the executive director or that person's designee before it is moved at the microphone. What I neglected to put in here is we always have simple little one-page forms for that. I think they're in triplicate. And that you put your amendment to the amendment on with all these things. You sign it, you have your seconder sign it. And then you get the forms at the front of the House. Just go up toward the podium. There's sergeants there going, hey, are you looking for a form? Pardon me. And then when you've completed it, you give it to one of those sergeants there too, because they're looking for people who want to do that. They're prepared to help you out. The soonest, if you know you're planning to present an amendment to an amendment on any of these topics, any of the amendments, the sooner you can get it to the podium or even to staff ahead of time, the better, because then we display it on the screen while it's being discussed, assuming you actually get to move it at the microphone. It's always possible that the debate could potentially close before you reach your spot at the microphone. So, but if you're called on and you present your amendment to the amendment, we'd like to have it display on the screen so that people can follow along a little more clearly. So the sooner you get it to us, the better, because we have to do a little shuffling backstage to make that happen. And that is my last slide. I think I'll take the presentation down so we can all see each other. And then turn it back over to Sue.
Perfect. So, yep. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat, but I have some questions that I will, bring up that have been brought to my question and from people that may not have been at a House of Delegates. So what time during so let's say amendment 1 is proposed to the, it comes up and someone would like to make an amendment with that. So an amendment to that amendment. What time would they do that? Does the motion get moved and seconded, and then is that done during discussion? When is the appropriate time to do that?
The amendment first has to be moved by the maker, or any delegate can move any amendment, but it's usually moved by the maker and they speak to it. And then any point thereafter, somebody can move an amendment to the amendment. I don't mean to be short. I think that answers it.
Right. That's right. I mean, but it needs to be moved and seconded and on the floor for discussion before someone can make an amendment to that.
Yes. And I don't know how much of this audience has been to KI conventions before, but sometimes we have various amendments to the amendments proposed. We'll deal with one first, and then depending on who raises what first, we could have, I'm just going to make up a number. Let's say there's 5 amendments to the amendments proposed on amendment number 4. So as to which of those we deal with first, it depends on which of those people get to a microphone first to say, here's my amendment to the amendment. So we'll deal with that one first. And then once we're done dealing with that one, we'll go back to the main motion, whether maybe potentially changed by the amendment to the amendment. Potentially not, depending on whether. So we'll go back to the main motion, and then someone else will have to get to another microphone to move their additional amendment to the amendment.
Should those that have amendments go to the pro or the con microphone? Does it matter?
No, it does not matter for those.
Okay.
You can be in either line. You can go to the closest line.
All right. The question has been raised about what is the agenda for basically the agenda for the House with the elections and the amendments.
Yeah, let me remind myself on that.
Okay. Or if Paul knows.
It is. Okay, here it is.
The amendments are first.
Okay.
So we will do the amendments and then we'll do the elections.
Right. The executive director, the executive director is mandated by the bylaws to do a report. So after I speak for about 2.5 hours, then we'll go right into amendments.
And you're providing lunch during that time, correct, Paul?
No lunch.
No lunch. Oh, okay. So you're just
just
gonna keep
remarks.
talking.
No lunch, just remarks.
Okay, okay. Just wanted to check because so people know how to plan for that. So then we'll do we have a couple of memorial resolutions, and then we will do the amendments. The elections, we'll start with the president-elect, the president, then the U.S. and Pacific Canada trustees, and then the vice president, correct?
Correct.
That is the routine. Okay. And it's interesting. I was sitting here making a note, knowing that the first, the time limits or that have been designated for the amendments, basically for the 10 amendments, if they were all to come for the House, that would be 3 hours, based on nobody extending or nobody, shortening up any of those amendments. So just to give, if they were to all go to their full length of time, I think it's important for people to make sure they understand it is a 2-minute time limit. Oftentimes people will get going into their amendment or their pro or con with the whole story about who they are and what they do, and then you get to the end and they're done and they get frustrated because they can't say anything. So if you know someone who is would like to make a comment, we can't stop anybody from making those comments unless the time is out, but if you can help them in a way so they get their point across, that is always very helpful. Especially if you're sitting up at the front trying to listen to that information and trying to keep the House moving in the correct manner of time-wise and stuff like that. So, please make sure that if you could help someone, that would be a great opportunity to do that.
And Sue, I don't know
yes.
if everyone's been there before. We do have timekeepers on the stage keeping track of all these time limits. They'll cue the president if someone reaches their time, and then the president will deal with it in her own way.
And then the way the microphones are set up, it'll be microphone 1. So let's say if you're looking at the stage on the left-hand side, that will be microphone 1, 3, 5. Microphone 2, 4, 6 would be on the right-hand side.
And we'll probably only have 4, but they're staggered. Okay. They're opposite numbers.
But they're staggered. So if we have 4, so if microphone 1 and 3 are the pro microphones, which they will be designated, there will be a sergeant-at-arms person there with a person in a sign that says pro and the number. So the president would say, microphone 1, do you have a speaker? Microphone 1 has a speaker, that they will speak. Then we will go to the con microphone. Microphone 2, do you have a speaker? If we don't have a speaker at microphone 2, they will go back to microphone number 3 to do the con. So the question is raised as, if there are no other speakers for either the pro or the con side, do you continue the pro speakers or do you continue the con speakers? Or how does that work?
And Paul, I don't know, I don't mean to hop in all the time. That's a judgment call by the president. He or she may say, if we have no more opposing speakers or we have no more advocating speakers, she'll ask the House, shall we just move to a vote? Or she or he may say, we don't want to cut you short on this. Let's hear what people have to say, and continue out the time limit a little bit. So that's a judgment call.
Okay, I got to look at my questions here.
Sure, there's nothing in the rules about that.
Okay. So the maker of the motion will make the motion.
Sue, can I make a comment?
Yes, go for it.
So talking about time and calling the question means ending debate, ending discussion. Use that cautiously, because if it's a situation like you're talking about, the president will say, well, look, we only have one side wanting to speak now, so maybe we should go to a vote. It doesn't seem to be much debate left. You all have made up your minds. But if somebody calls a question really soon, there's one delegate who's always known for calling the question, and sometimes he calls it a little bit too soon, and we don't get to hear what the delegates are thinking, which could be important. So be careful how quickly you call the question. I mean, we do want to keep moving fast this year to make sure we cover them all, but be careful how much you cut debate short.
Right, because that's I have known last year there were several people that said I would have loved to hear more information, but the question was called so quickly that people couldn't continue the discussion, and they said, well, I'd like to say something. I'm like, well, they called the question and the people, the delegates voted to call the question and to shut down debate. So that's what happens. So those are things that people need to understand, is if someone does that. Now the president could say that there's been motion to call the question, do you want to call the questions? No, right? You would have to vote against it to do that. So,
Yeah.
And I do understand, that thought, but the House, whenever he does get up to call a question, the House has to approve it. And they always seem to.
right. But if the
That's
House doesn't
true.
want to do that and they want to continue to debate, they have to make that known.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Right? They do have to make it known. Okay, so the next question I have was, we have all these amendments before the House, the 10 amendments. Why didn't we put all the dues ones together? Or why, we just decide that we want $10 or $20 or $30? Talk about how the amendments were put together. And I know there's some procedures that we follow when information comes from the board.
I'll let Paul deal with that unless he wants
Want me to do that? Absolutely, Diana. Before I do answer that question, let me just say in front of everybody, Diana has been fantastic in her tenure at Kiwanis International, and I know a lot of Kiwanis members will miss her involvement. She will be with us in Denver, but just as exciting for Diana in this new chapter is Erica's new chapter, and so we're very excited to have Erica now serving as our governance specialist. So shout out to both of you, because you all are critical to what we do on a daily and at convention annual basis. So thank you, Diana, and thank you, Erica, for saying yes and being included as part of this element of the team. So I forgot the question. No, I remember the question. So here's how that works is the boards have their proposed amendments. The board, the Kiwanis International Board has their proposed amendments, and then clubs and districts have their proposed amendments. In the standard of tradition, the board's amendments are presented first, and that's the only reason why it might seem a little out of order. But at least when we had those proposed amendments from districts and clubs, at least we grouped them together at that point. So the dues amendments are grouped together. There were originally two tier changing amendments, TIER tier changing amendments that one district has withdrawn, and there's only one now, and then the two other amendments that were similar are grouped together. So to answer your question, Sue, that's why, and it was not intended as any strategic component. It's just how it has been, and it is rare that other amendments that pertain to the same topic that the International Board is proposing to amend has been offered at the same time. So that's why it is that way. That does not imply that it can't be changed on the floor, but who knows what the situation will be when we are on the floor in Denver in the House. Diana, any additional comments you want to add to that?
No, thank you.
Okay.
So one of the questions that has come up over in a couple of other sessions was, so let's say that we get to amendment number 1, and amendment number 1 is successful and it passes. Would we move on to number 2?
We would move on to the board's number 2.
The board's number, which would be amendment number 2.
Correct.
Okay. So is there any thought to the fact that, so number 1, number 5 and 6, I believe, are also dues related, correct?
Correct.
So if number 1 fails, we would still move on to number 2.
Correct.
Correct. So we would
Correct.
not jump to another dues one. We would still continue in that same order. We would continue with number 2.
That would be the order, but that could be at the House's discretion. Diana, correct me if I'm wrong. At the House's discretion, with the vote to change the order, it could be changed, right?
Yes, a delegate can propose before they adopt the agenda. So they ideally need to propose this before we start into the amendments. They'd say,
Okay.
Because one thing we adopted at the beginning of the session is the agenda and the standing rules. So at that point, if somebody's thinking they want to change the orders, they should do it then. And then they say, the president will say, okay, we've had a motion to change the order, and they have to be very specific how they want the order to be changed. Then the president will say, okay, we've had a motion. We're going to vote on it. And the delegates, it takes a majority vote to change the order. So the delegates will either vote that change up or vote that change down, and then we'll respond accordingly. I will say that causes a bit of a scurry backstage, but we shall cope and try to keep it sane for everyone.
So let's say number 1 passes, that would be the increase in the dues. That means that those changes for those dues increases would impact amendment number 2. Because we would, at that point, you have a new dues number, right? So that would impact number 2. So that we would be dealing with the actual dues amount that we had voted on in number 1.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And I think that was a question that someone had at one time, was like, okay, so let's say that number 1 passes. What are we doing in number 2? Well, number 2 will be adjusted.
Yes.
To accommodate that change.
Each amendment, if 1 and or 2 are adopted, then the subsequent amendments that have to do with a similar subject, they will have to be adjusted during the House. Right. Because something else will have just recently become law if you adopt 1 or 2 going forward. And Paul, is it appropriate to talk about what will happen with 5 or 6 if 1 is adopted?
Absolutely.
So we have it so we're talking about the other 2. Number 1 is the board's proposal on raising dues. Number 5 and 6 are the other 2 proposals on raising dues. For those of you that don't have the numbering memorized, like we've had it drilled in our head for months. If number 1 passes, number 5 and 6 had both said they plan to withdraw. It will take permission of the House to do that, but they plan to request to withdraw. So there won't be a conflict. Some people, I think, are asking, well, what if we adopt all 3 of them? Well, there won't be the opportunity to adopt all 3 of them. That's also against Robert's rules anyway, because when you've adopted 1 on subject X or aspect X, you don't reconsider subject X or aspect X with another amendment, because you've already just dealt with that. And they have agreed to withdraw because they said, we're on the same team. We just think that a dues amendment is appropriate for Kiwanis at this time. We're trying to help by making these proposals, but we're all on the same team. So they've said if any one of these, let's say number 1 doesn't pass, that's the dues proposal, the board's proposal, then we would, when we come to number 5, we will consider it. They won't withdraw. If number 5 fails as well, then when number 6 comes up, we will consider it, because nothing else on dues would have been adopted yet. So that's how that would work. And then let's say the board's proposal on dues does not pass, but your proposal on the tiers does. Then when number 5 does come up, the first alternate amendment on dues, when it does come up, they'll have to adjust their figures appropriately. And we're talking with each of those proposers in advance to show the right things on the screen if those scenarios happen. So the president, the parliamentarian, your executive director, your backstage staff, both your incoming and outgoing governance specialists, and we're all intimately aware of these scenarios and trying to plot them out so that the delegates can get through it all sanely. We know that there may be some confusion, or at least a perception of confusion going into it. Part of the reason we're having this, and glad we're having this, but we're preparing to try to make it sane for the House of Delegates and avoid confusion.
And I think that's what's important is I think there's a lot with Robert's Rules of Order that if you're not really versed in it, and we joke in our in districts, it's like, well, we all have our own parliamentarian, right? Well, are they really following Robert's rules, or are those their version of Robert's rules? So we want to make sure that we have the right information there, and that's why the staff and the governance specialists and the parliamentarian have been spending a lot of time on this, thinking this through. And when we did the Voices of Service, where we went through the first amendments and we brought up some things that we found and took back to Diana and Erica, they were able to make those adjustments ahead of time so that we could get those adjustments out to people and make sure they understood that, yes, this is how it's going to work.
Yeah, so we appreciated that, because those have zoomed right over. I can't tell you the number of people that looked at this and not seen it the same way. Right. So we appreciate that. Yeah, you
So
had
that-
that session and the input we got from it.
Right, so that's helpful for the people, for the staff that's there doing that, and for those of us that are, hosting sessions like this, but just making sure that people understand, because it's not a simple, task, and when you've got the, you're gonna have the anxiety and the excitement in the room, and everything's going on, and you've got people talking and not talking, that causes people to raise their level of
Yes, but I
anxiety.
want everybody to keep in mind and pass this on. Parliamentary procedure isn't to make things difficult or legalistic. It is to keep order in the House. So you're
Right.
only dealing with one question at a time, one consideration of something at a time. It's to keep order, to give a fair process to all the parties that do raise a point, whether it's a point of information, a point of order, a motion itself, a motion being an amendment to the amendment. We deal with just that matter before we move on to another matter or come back to another matter. So it's just meant to provide order and sanity, and that's what the whole thing is. So don't let the concept, oh my gosh, they're following Robert's rules. That shouldn't be intimidating. That should be reassuring. So if you can pass that concept along, that might help.
And there will be the question, if there's something out of order, the president will call it out of order.
Yes, right.
There is a parliamentarian that will be there. I mean,
And we have one of the best folks. We really
we
do.
have one of the best,
He's
yes.
amazing.
We're well versed on that. There'll be somebody watching the numbers on what's whether pros first or cons first. I mean, there'll be people watching the numbers to make sure we don't have two cons speaking, instead of a pro and a con. I mean, granted, things happen, right? But those kind of things can be corrected, and the timing and stuff like that. So we have one of the best parliamentarians and is well versed in the governance of our
Yes.
organization.
Yeah, yes.
It's not something that he just walked in and said, okay, yeah, here's the stuff.
Yeah, we didn't desire him yesterday.
Yeah.
He deals with other organizations, many other organizations as well. He's not just our parliamentarian. So often having that feedback of how others do it can be very helpful to Kiwanis ahead of time and during the session.
Right. So yes, the president, if you see the president lean over to the parliamentarian, they're trying to discuss, okay, what's the right thing to do here, right?
What in the heck just happened?
Yeah,
Well, I don't know.
who said what? Because it gets you've got 100,000 people yelling at you, right? Or trying to bring something up. Okay, it's not that many, but that would be nice. But trying to bring stuff up, and you're like, okay, what just happened? So that's why there's a number of staff that are there, along with the parliamentarian, helping guide that along the way. Okay. Other questions? Do we have anything else in chat? I think I got all mine. So we know about calling the question. Yes. So we answered the question about the dues. If number one passes, what the plan is there. There will be 2 sessions at the convention on the dues amendments. One
on Thursday, one on
Friday.
Thursday
At, I believe it's at 4 o'clock.
I think the program will be posted online in the next few days, maybe.
Yeah.
Does that sound right, Paul?
Yeah. So there will be there is an outline, a general outline.
It is there already. Okay.
Here, not the booklet itself, but there is a general outline of
good.
What workshop or what's available,
which days they're on. Good.
Yep. And Lindsay was with us a couple of weeks ago, and she went through the schedule to make it there. But that information is there. We will have a session on dues on Thursday and Friday, so it's potential that we could answer additional questions during that time if people had additional questions.
Yeah, bring your questions there.
Bring your questions there,
others to bring your questions. Whether it's a question about the dues themselves, the amounts, or what they're paying for, that kind of thing, or whether it's a question about parliamentary procedure, because our parliamentarian will be there. I'll be there. Erica will be there. Paul will probably be there if he can at all, I'm sure, and some other board members too. And
right. So we will have a number of people there that can help answer the questions. And both sessions hold 700 people. So we should have plenty of room for anybody that wants to be there on both of those individual sessions. And it will pretty much be the same both time slots. We just want to make sure we give everybody the opportunity. Why should there be an amount? Greg has a question. Why should there be an amount in the proposed dues in Amendment 2?
Why should there be an amount?
Amendment 2 addresses the tiers.
Mm-hmm.
And currently the dues amounts that are in that amendment are the current dues.
But it says in 3 different places in that amendment that each tier will pay the dues amounts that delegates may adopt as part of either proposed amendments 1 5 or 6, and
Correct.
those are the
I-
3 dues
I-
amendments.
I just thought it'd be less confusing if you just put like a to be determined or something rather than the actual amount in there. That's all. In the proposed section.
We're
Those
not allowed
amounts
to
that are-
actually do that because it wouldn't be a valid motion, but that's how. Why
Because
we
those
put the
amounts are
caveats
already
that
in the
we did.
bylaws, right?
They're in
Diana?
those amounts are already
Yeah.
in the bylaws, right? So you can't take them out.
No, under the proposed section, not current, the proposed.
We couldn't leave it blank. We couldn't leave to be determined, but that's where the asterisks all say basically it is to be determined. So you're right in matter of fact, Greg, but in the spirit of the law, you're right. But in the letter of the law, we had to put an amount. So
Okay, thank you.
And I would hate to have a blank there with a TBD because you never know what number someone would come up with, right? Weird
right,
it's
somebody
gonna
will try
be.
to amend that from the floor, or they'll vote it down because they're afraid we're going to put $100 in there.
Right.
So
Right. Okay, any other questions? Any concerns?
did we answer everyone's
Did we
potential
answer all the
confusion
questions?
about potential confusion about the what ifs? Are
The
we
what
going to
ifs.
address all 3? Things like
I may not be right on this, but I've heard some rumblings in the past that people weren't necessarily happy with the way the parliamentarian handled things in the past conventions. Don't know if that's a situation that does exist or it's being addressed, or I don't even know the nature, but I've heard rumblings. So
I will say, and he has said this many times, and you will if you think back to all the other conventions you've been at. The parliamentarian, they're at the elbow of the president, but it is always the president, whether it's for Kiwanis or any other group that any other parliamentarian works with. It's the presiding officer that makes the call. I'm not trying to place blame. It's a teamwork, but the parliamentarian simply advises the president. And I will say the president, not only just for Kiwanis, but I know for other organs, sometimes they take that advice and sometimes they don't. So if there's particular challenge here, let me tell you, if a delegate on the floor has a problem with a call that's made, you can question that call. You can do what's called appeal, and that's actually in the booklet this year. So there's a process for that. And it's very simple. If you feel like a call was wrong, whether the president was the one pronouncing at the podium or you feel like it was a parliamentarian who whispered it in her ear, it doesn't matter who made it. But yeah, that has to be dealt with during the House. And I just say, I know we have a very well-versed parliamentarian, well-versed with Kiwanis and well-versed with Robert's rules and well-versed with a number of organizations.
And there's always going to be some, it's kind of like I equated to basket or to baseball. Are they out or are they safe? I mean, I've been watching all week about, well, that person was really safe. They called him out type of a thing. It's really that judgment.
Each one is a judgment call. Yeah,
Right.
I don't know. I was thinking back to when Bob Moore was president, and that was a dues increase year, and he called it on a voice vote, and there was a lot of was he out or was he safe?
Right.
Determination on that.
Right.
But that's long ago history.
And the president, as the presiding officer, has the final call on that.
Yes. But the delegate body actually has the final call. If a delegate appeals,
Right.
then the delegate body gets to decide, really. Are we going with appeal or are we going with
We're going to go the other way.
call?
Right.
So
okay. Any other?
I think all the delegates have appeal.
They all do. You're right. Depending on whether it's orange or apple or banana. Okay, so we have to have some fun, right?
I had to lighten this up. It was getting too deep.
This is going to sound like I'm denigrating, but I can't pass the joke. Some are more fruity than others. I forgot my joke. Some are more fruity than others. Pretty bad when you forget your joke.
I'd be the same way if it's not written down.
It goes for all of us. Some are more fruity than others.
Paul, right? I mean, to compete with Paul is just impossible. So, you just let Paul handle the joke. So
I will say, I think our House of Delegates is a pretty savvy group, and I appreciate that about them. And you never predict the House of Delegates.
Right. And I think the big thing for recommendation is that someone has read that information, right? That you're just not walking in there, which we know happens. It's like anything else you do, right? People go, well, who are you voting for? Or what are you doing? And, you're depending on other people's opinions. But if you've taken the time to read the bylaws, and I just threw Robert's Rules of Order, the book on the floor, Yeah, but I mean, if you've taken the time to review that stuff and have paid attention to it, of course, you know, you have a better understanding and you can, you know, you can figure out what there is.
I will say, we put a lot of hard work into the amendments book each year with the pros and cons arguments right there in the booklet. So please
Right.
take a close look at those because they're really very helpful.
Right, exactly, yeah. I mean, because the board's looking at, the people that are working that are looking at it both ways. You know, they know that, you know, there's someone that's gonna have a con and you're like, oh yeah, I didn't think about it that way. I mean, those are the things you gotta, that are
Yeah.
all, that's thought about all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, these amendments were due to the board. The board has been working on these for how long, Diana?
Well, they're due at the beginning of the year. They're due October 1. So
Right.
they're due very early, and that seems way early for people, but when you back up the timing, they have to be so that we can get them out 90 days ahead of the convention. And I know
Right.
that sounds, but and the board actually doesn't get them until January when the resolutions and bylaws committee reports on them. So, but they've had it for that long.
But you know, they've been in, some of the stuff's been in process, right? I mean, you've got
Right. These are the
separate-
amendments that were proposed by the board. Sorry,
Right.
I'm talking about the ones submitted by clubs and districts,
Right.
but the ones proposed by the board, of course, they started the dues amendment last year and
right.
and now they're back with it for
They're back with it,
a
so.
new try.
We had a question about do we have a delegate account, or do we have a house, or do we have, I should say, do we have a registration number? Anybody, any chance from anybody? Paul, you're,
Paul,
It
you're
was right
on
around
mute.
1,500.
Paul, you're on mute.
It was
don't
right
think that's
around
quite-
1,500.
Is it 1,500? Okay, thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Diana. Yeah, it's about 1,500.
And a large percentage of those will be delegates, so that's great.
and then registration closes,
I think
Did I-
it closes for
Early
general
No.
registration.
31st.
Yeah, I know delegate certification closes at like 10:30 that morning, which is when the session will have already
Right.
started. So you have ample opportunity to get in there. Registration, I can't remember at a glance. Does anybody know
The
if it closes?
May 31st is the early.
okay,
Oh, I thought you meant
registration
on
deadline.
site.
Oh,
I thought you
thank you,
meant on
Brad.
site. Okay.
You can come and register on site, but the
Right.
early bird price
Yeah.
goes away on May 31st.
yes.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you were talking. about on
Once the
site.
amendments pass, when will the official documents be available for members?
What official documents, like the final version?
The final versions, CK,
Yeah.
are you talking final versions, or are you talking, I mean, it's gonna take time for it to go back to the office to get it.
But
Printed.
we try to get the final version. They're standing by, our people from our communications department are literally standing by to post the results.
Right.
It's not often that an amendment is changed on the floor, but it does sometimes happen. And when it does, they try to get the wording in there with the results. It was adopted as amended to include this wording here, to
Right.
change that amount or to whatever. So they try to have the results posted really quickly, and then we'll get them out via other means as well, whatever official publications we have going on these days, and probably some article here or there. And
Additionally, though, Diana, when will you have had the time post-convention to officially make the changes in the bylaws that go
in
on the
bylaws?
website?
That's a good point. We like to allow ourselves 30 days, and none of the amendments that are going to be adopted that are even being considered this year, I don't think any, well, many of them, at least most of them, are not even effective until October 1. But that version will be available for people to look at approximately 30 days after the convention, but it won't go into effect. Those new rules won't be effective until October 1.
October 1, yep.
I think all of them were a delayed effective date this year.
The House of Delegates will, I know there's some time, I don't even know what time it starts, I don't have that in front of me right now.
8:30.
8:30.
The doors open at 8.
Doors open at 8, so you can get there early and get yourself registered and get your voting device and get yourself seated. You know, you have to plan that. I mean, if you look at, if everything were to go as long as it is scheduled, you're talking 3 hours for amendments. You know, it could be what, 4 or 5 hours by the time you get through all the speeches and all the elections, and
Starts at 8. I think it's scheduled to run up until 1.
I think it's scheduled to 1.
That would be
One-ish.
5 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, 1-ish. So it may be a late lunch for people, but hopefully they'll feel like they had some good, robust discussion if it takes
Right,
that long.
right.
So, and that their voices were heard.
Right. The thing is, you don't want to rush it. I mean, that's how I feel. It's like, I don't want to rush it just to meet a
So bring a
timeline.
snack with you just in case.
Right, bring a snack. And I
I
understand
say
people are
that. I
making,
hope snacks are allowed. I don't know, but I assume that. What they
But I
don't
know
know,
that
you know,
people are-
we're,
right, people are making travel arrangements and that kind of stuff, but it's also,
this is
respons-
probably the reason, the voting session is probably why your clubs are sending you, unless they were
Yes.
sending you for some type of training. So
Right.
you try to finish that out and be there.
Right.
And with the amendments happening first, they probably want you to stick around for the elections process, which
Right.
happens after the amendments. So if at all possible, stick around for the whole thing.
and I know the candidates will appreciate you sticking around.
The very end is the incoming president gives his remarks,
Right.
which is often at the end, and that's always interesting to hear.
It's always see what their plans are.
Everybody that's scheduled to go to Denver and be in that house, I would ask and urge everyone to stay until the end, because the opportunity for Lee Kuan Yew to present his remarks as president designate is meaningful for that person and inspirational for those who are there to hear it.
Yeah, Kuan Yew is an amazing man. He's going to be a great leader.
Okay, any other questions?
Thanks, Sue,
Thank you.
for hurting the cats.
Hey, no problem. So thanks to Diana for joining us this evening. Erica, we're glad you're with us tonight, and we're looking forward to working with you over the next year. As a person who was on the bylaws and resolutions committee this past year, we had a few sessions to review them all, to go through things. So it's not an easy task, but it's one that those of us that work on, we like to do it. Otherwise,
It's vital. It's vital to the organization.
critical
though,
to the
yeah.
organization. Exactly.
Really
So
is. Mhm.
Paul, we thank you for being with us tonight. I wish everybody in the states that are celebrating the long holiday weekend a safe and happy holiday. Again, we will not be meeting next Thursday night unless you want to join me in Boston and we talk about sports medicine, but that'll be a new realm for me. I'm going to go watch their House of Delegates. See how that works. That ought to be interesting. See what they're all talking about. So we will see you in 2 weeks. With the speaker will be Will Tiemann, our Spartan Sports Vision. We'll talk about broadcasting for sports for the Michigan State University men's basketball team. Of course, it's always fun to, do something. We're gonna have a break before that. We get into convention. So with that, we thank everyone for being with us tonight. Once the recording is up and running, I will post it on Facebook and we'll go from there. So thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thanks,
Right.
Sue. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.